Hey, you guys, welcome back. Breaking news, huge updates in the Mica Miller case pertaining to none other than John Paul Miller. This week, not one, but two women have came forward and filed lawsuits against John Paul Miller, claiming sexual abuse. Now, I'm going to touch on these lawsuits. Feel free to put down your phone and listen. It's going to be a lot of talking. I'm going to read off the paperwork. And I also want to throw out a trigger warning before continuing. Okay, so here we go. It says Pastor John Paul Miller, 44, allegedly attacked the girl only identified as Jane Doe in 1998 while at Sunday school at his father's church, according to the complaint filed Tuesday in Horry County. Miller, then 19, allegedly took the girl into his dad's office at the All Nations Church before forcing her outside to his truck, where he sexually assaulted her, court papers allege. The girl was a virgin at the time, according to the lawsuit. She claims Miller, the controversial pastor at Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach, assaulted her again years later when she ran into him during a trip to the city in 2023. The pastor leaned in to give her a hug before suddenly shoving his hands down her pants and started touching her genitals without consent. Jane Doe also alleges that Miller later tried to use a Bible verse to justify the attack, telling her, "No man is without sin and temptation. God understands that." The suit also names All Nations Church and Solid Rock Church as defendants, accuses him and other leaders of covering up a pattern of alleged abuse over the years. This church was John Paul Miller's sexual playground, the suit claimed. The alleged victim said she felt immense guilt after learning about the death of Miller's wife, Mica, last year, and believed if she had spoken up sooner, she could have prevented more harm. Now, I feel horrible she feels that way because that is something that nobody can ever understand unless you went through it. And coming forward is probably the bravest thing they will ever do. So they just need all the prayers. So this has dropped today. It was filed by Jane Doe number 2 against John Paul Miller and his father, Reginald Wayne Miller, as well as their respective religious organizations, stating All Nations Cathedral Church, Solid Rock Ministries, and Cathedral Hall Academy. It goes on to say that Jane Doe number 2 was 14 years old at the time of the alleged assaults. All right, guys, 14 years old, okay? Please remember that. The claim says the coverage of the death of John Paul Miller's estranged wife, Mica, triggered repressed memories of the assaults that she had occurred between 1999 and 2001. The plaintiff says she enrolled at Cathedral Hall Academy in the fall of 1999. Her parents believed the private Christian school in Myrtle Beach was the best decision for her education. The school was run by Pastor Wayne Miller and John Paul Miller, who offered a faith-based education in a nurturing environment. Jane Doe number 2 says one day in the fall of 1999, she found herself alone at the church with John Paul Miller, who was seated at the piano, playing softly when he asked her if she wanted to play the instrument. At just 14 years old, Jane Doe number 2 was trusting and saw no reason to decline. As she turned to leave, she says, John Paul pulled her into a hug. She barely had time to react before his hands moved down her back, past her waist and under her clothing, touching her bare butt. The girl reported the incident to a teacher, but instead of receiving help, she was sent to Reginald Wayne Miller's office, and when she arrived, John Paul Miller was already there. Reginald Wayne, demanded that she repeat her accusation with his son standing right beside him. Jane Doe number 2 voice wavered and she told the truth. Reginald Wayne did not ask for details. He did not care. He shouted at her, "You will not lie about my son." Then came her punishment. The plaintiff says she was forced to write the words, "I will not lie about John Paul Miller," 5,000 times. In the days that followed, Jane Doe 2 says the torment escalated. And taking their cues from the Millers, the students at the school turned on her with full force, calling her a liar, a whore, and a slut. They whispered behind her back, shoved notes under her desk, and made her life a daily humiliation. Then came the physical assault. The lawsuit says one afternoon, two girls grabbed Jane Doe 2 from behind and held her arms back while another girl ripped open her shirt and stuffed tissues into her bra. John Paul Miller, who was supposedly the teacher, was present and laughed. On other occasions, Jane Doe 2 says boys and girls shoved her into the bathroom stalls, slapped her, yanked her hair. One student even held her down and sprayed bug spray in her mouth and eyes while others watched. And she says that through it all, John Paul Miller was there, smirking, encouraging, and watching. There's a lot more that I want to read off these lawsuits, but I'm just going to keep it at that tonight because that's already a lot of information to handle. I'm sure these are just two of multiple victims that hopefully come forward, but man, my heart goes out to these victims. These are some horrible stories, and I can't help but just think about what Mica really went through. If John Paul Miller was so horrible at age 19, how horrible he actually is at 44. And we probably don't even know even a fraction of it. Super hard stuff to talk about, but it is so necessary to get it all out there. I do want to talk about more stuff that was in the lawsuit, so I will make a part 2. I just really wanted to touch on that information tonight. Very important stuff. So I will see you guys in the next video. Appreciate you guys being here. I hope you guys have a good night.